is in the building. Facto.
Welcome to Ignorance Is Contagious, a podcast about stories and the lessons you learn from them. I'm James LeGrand.
Now I'm Abdul Majid.
In today's episode, we're discussing Generation Z. Many political pundits are saying that this general election will be decided by Generation Z after being in the forefront and on both sides of many issues like the George Floyd protests, women's reproductive rights, the Me Too movement, and the Black Lives Matter movement. We're asking the question, is Gen Z as woke as they say they are? With us, as always, is the lover of all things funny, Kristen J. Thank you for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
The reason I chose this particular topic is because of Kristen. Kristen and I had a conversation about just the youth and that particular generation and how they view life. And I thought, wow, this would be a good conversation to have, or at least it was a great suggestion to give. So I found something that I thought fit the bill. So whenever you're ready, Kristen J., take it away.
Why Generation Z might not be as woke as most think. The Hill by David McLennan and Whitney Ross Manzo, opinion contributors. One of the most popular ideas in American politics is that a large majority of voters under 40 are woke. Originating in the Black activist community during the 1960s, the term, intended as a signal to other Black Americans to watch out for police brutality and systemic racism, became more prominent during the 2014 Black Lives Matter movement. Today, it has become a catch-all for being progressive or liberal and is more likely to be used pejoratively. Conservative politicians have made wokeness a major talking point, and some, such as Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, have pursued aggressive policy agendas to reduce what he and others consider to be the indoctrinating effects of wokeness on K-12 and higher education. As researchers of the political attitudes of different generations, we think the portrayal of young voters as woke on all issues is wrong, particularly for those 18 to 24. This group, referred to as Gen Z, is not a monolithic group and has attitudes that run contrary to their depiction, which raises real questions about how they may impact politics in the 2022 midterm elections and beyond. Gen Z has been shaped by mass shootings in schools, horrible instances of racial injustice like George Floyd's murder and the COVID-19 pandemic. This, according to the researchers, has made them more tolerant of differences, empathetic to the needs of marginalized people, and desirous of government being more active in solving societal problems, all of which are left-leaning ideas. We have found in recent Meredith polls that on many social issues, abortion rights, protection for LGBTQ+ persons, legalization of marijuana, Gen Z voters do possess some of the most liberal views. In the most recent Meredith poll, almost half of Gen Z respondents wanted to expand access to abortion beyond what is guaranteed by the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision, while only 29% of millennial respondents felt the same. However, a deeper examination of the polling data reveals some significant gender differences within Gen Z. Males are significantly less supportive, 30% less, of expanding abortion access or even retaining the provisions established under Roe v. Wade than Gen Z women.
James, what is your definition of the word woke? What does it mean to you?
That's a great question. I think wokeness, at least, let me start by saying there's a lot of different definitions out there, right? And I think there are certain people who use it for political purpose, certain people use it for social justice reasons. But I think in general, it's a heightened state of social, political, and cultural awareness. I think that's really what it is. I really like the definition that we started with, that in terms of where it came from, that wokeness is a way of saying, stay awake, basically, right? Stay woke, watch out, just so, you don't find yourself on the wrong side of a police engagement when you've done nothing wrong. I think that's still the underpinning of wokeness. It's being aware of what's going on. And not necessarily listening to the popular narratives, but really seeing what's taking place.
I have the definition of woke, and I am hell-bent on making sure that this definition stays exactly what it is because it has been so run amok with. Okay, it's my personal mission to preserve the meaning of woke. Woke, the awareness of depth levels of diabolical acts inflicted directly and specifically on Black people, directly and specifically by white people in America, derived from the cultural warning from one Black to another when traveling through sundown towns. Bam! Thank you. Good night, everybody. You've been beautiful. Love you. Love you. Ignorance is contagious. Good night,
Where'd you find that definition?
I put those words together
Okay.
myself. But
Okay.
the definition does come from a specific time era. I didn't write down the date, but riding through sundown towns is everybody, you guys all know about the sundown towns. Don't get caught riding through a sundown towns. And because white people would kill you. And this is not something that is global. This is not something outside of America. This is America, and this is specific to Black and white. It's not gay. It's not, what else we got going on? It's not women's rights. This is Black and white, and here in America. Stay woke, because the white man will kill you, Black man. That's it.
So Kristen, before you do, I just got to ask, the passion you have around the definition, why? Where does that come from?
It comes from my frustration and annoyance with how white America has taken it and run with it, and they have changed it, and they have altered it, and they have misconstrued it, and it's like, no, bring it on back. And other people now want to be a part of it, which happens a lot in our country with certain things, like Me Too was this, and then it turned into that. Everything, Black Lives Matter. I'm kind of annoyed how, when we hear the classic, all lives matter. Yeah, they do. But right now, Black Lives Matter. But the woke thing, it is specific and definitive, and I need for everybody to remember and not let go of that. And that's kind of also what this whole article is about, is like remembering and not letting things get watered down. Right now, we're experiencing Blackness being watered down, not just in America, though, globally. When I hear people, I'm sorry, I don't mean to go on a tangent all off and let me.
No, this is why I asked. Yeah.
When I hear people say things like Morocco is a Middle Eastern country, what? When did we get ice cream? What? It bothers me. And I mean, yeah, the world is evolving and things are changing, but somehow Black always fades to Black. And I'm tired of it. I'm like, no, that's not what it is. It's specifically this. No, you cannot take this definition and use it for your convenience. This is what it is. And I don't care how you feel. White America, this is what it is. This is what y'all do to us, and this is what it is. Thank you. Good night.
So before Kristen's eloquent
Was
speech,
it eloquent, really?
Yes, it was.
It was
very Academy.
I go by Kristen's original definition of wokeness. Watch out for white folks because they be stealing shit. So
and murdering.
You didn't add the murdering. You didn't add the murdering when you first gave me the definition.
I said the depths of diabolical acts.
No. You're talking about. I'm not talking about this now. This conversation. I'm talking about when we had another conversation. You were like, watch out for white because they be stealing shit.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, that's all inclusive. Stealing, killing, they just be doing us dirty. And I'm tired. You live long enough, you get tired of certain things. I'm tired.
I do have to agree with your soliloquy that
James, I'm on fire. What?
You got it. You got it going on.
That I do get frustrated by the co-opting and watering down of Black culture and then taking it for their own usage or I remember at one point when cornrows, they attributed cornrows to like our Kardashian. They attributed not even a month ago they contributed the Caesar fade cut to Kelsey.
Yes, stop it.
Kelsey.
Calm down.
So I do understand the angst when you're constantly seeing the watering down or the appropriation of things that Black people do, and then not giving them credit, and then the constant watering down of our contributions, our things we started. I mean, this whole conversation about Beyonce and country music. People literally had to go back and like, hold on, they actually started country music. So how can they be stealing something they started? So
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but here's what's so bad is that the black fades so far black that we don't even realize that everything came from us. We'll sit here and be like, oh, I guess we did get this from them. But when you peel back a few more layers, it's like, wait a minute, this was ours to begin with.
I do blame us for that, though.
That was the point of my conversation for this particular episode.
Yeah, because I blame us because with particular thing, especially regarding art, is because the fact that our community is so talented and so progressive with art, we forget about stuff, or we're like, we off that, and then let it go, and other people pick up that thing that we had and polish it off, even though it was like a gem, and then they'll take it and run with it. They've done it with jazz, they did it with rock and roll, they're doing it now with rap music. So it's R&B music. It just goes down the list of art in this world. Dance. I saw a girl make millions off a TikTok dance that another Black girl started.
Yes. And we're very embracing and we're very inclusive, but it doesn't work the same way for us. That's why everybody, when you listen to this particular episode, there are no more invites to the cookout. I'm shutting that shit.
Yeah, I have to say, our humanity can also be our Achilles.
Yeah,
the fact that we're that kid who's been abused for so much that they just want to love everybody, and while they're loving everybody, they're getting abused.
I think that's our nature, though. I think we're very loving, giving people by nature. We have to be.
It depends on where you go.
If we were any other way, though, we would have already taken out our oppressors.
I don't know if we've had the opportunity to do so, because hold on, let me finish. Because I do remember when we tried to, when the Americans went to Africa, and they started, oh my God, what is that country that they started in Africa?
Liberia.
Thank you, Liberia. Now it's called something else. But when they went to Liberia, one of the arguments, the problems that they had in Liberia and why it didn't succeed the way it should have, is because they said the Americans went over there and then started to treat the Black Africans the way white people treated Black people in this country. So
that's kind of where I was going to go. Yeah, because I three things I would say. Number one, when you look at the origins of wokeness, it was about survival, right? This was about signaling to say, hey, bro, you want to be safe going through this area? Here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to watch out for. It was that inside information that allowed folks to make sure that we protected everyone else, meaning everyone that was Black and that was the victim during those times, right? Which brings me to point number two. I think, this societal scrubbing that has and continues to take place is part of the reason why Black people don't understand their own culture. They don't understand what they've contributed to the world, right? Because in a world where, like we said, country music, which was started by, Black people, it's been going on for so long in non-Black quadrants of the world, if you will, that when Beyonce comes forward and says, hey, I'm going to do a country music video, a country music album, now suddenly it's like, well, wait, what? She's stealing from us. No, this was already appropriated. She's doing what was already within her cultural lineage, right? But I don't blame us, meaning other Black people, for not knowing that. There's been such a really well done systematic scrubbing of an identification of things that unless you're actively looking for the origins of things, you may not know it otherwise. So now I would say that in the age of the internet, it's easier to do that. But if you just accept what you're told and accept what you see every day on TV, it's hard to, unless you question literally everything, it's easy for something to get missed. Which brings me to point number three. One more point. So I do think that while most people are, and you guys are right, both you guys are right, are appropriating the term wokeness to mean other things, there are some pretty gifted politicians who know exactly what wokeness is, where it started, and is now using that as a dog whistle in their political agenda to be able to say this is an anti-black policy, but since we can't say that, we're going to call it anti-woke, right? And there's enough people going, wink, wink, gotcha. We hear you and we support, right? Because that's a culturally acceptable way of going directly after black people without saying that you are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I agree. They've done that for a very long time. I remember.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt.
When out in New York, in Brooklyn specifically, they used to instead of saying we're about to arrest a bunch of black people, we'd say we're about to get a bunch of yos, because that was the terminology for yo for black people. We're about to arrest a bunch of yos. So, but the one thing I will have to say, and I agree with, huh? Or urban.
Urban.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I do have to say about our culture, which frustrates me, and I understand what you're saying about how things get taken from us, what have you, but even if you look at like R&B, until the current conscious push by certain artists, we'll just drop it. We'll just drop it and be on to the next sometimes, and won't preserve that thing. It was recently done by our community with R&B music or house music, or we come up with these things and we're on to the next so fast because we're creating. We just drop it and move on to the next thing. So, if anything, I wish we would stop doing that.
Yes.
And it doesn't help that at the time, maybe not so much now, radio had certain formats that they had to fit. So they wouldn't play the new rap music along with the new R&B music. It had to be this or it's like they were constantly chasing the trend, that they did put music in the box. And certain black owned media companies or radio stations wouldn't play Nas with Anita Baker, even though collectively the three of us and many other people we know listen both to Nas and Anita Baker.
That's
so
right. And you make a point that as I think about Gen Z, the terms complexity and simplicity come to mind a lot. I think there's this massive desire for the country, United States at large, to simplify things into one or two alternatives, and that's it. And we tend to ignore the complexity that lives within all these different topics that we're talking about. So something as simple as the term music, you're exactly right. I listen to Nas. I listen to Anita Baker, right? I'm one of those people. But I have to listen to them on two different stations, right?
Yeah.
They won't exist on the same station because of this desire to simplify and give people binary choices, right? So it's some of that. And it's interesting because Gen Z, I think we have to appreciate Gen Z for embracing complexity, right? This is a population that grew up with cell phones in their hands, right? They were born with a cell phone at the ready, right? They use the internet that many of them have never seen in a set of encyclopedias, right? So we're talking about a population that is complex because the information they've received from the day they were born has been complex. It's been worldwide. It's not just limited to a city, a region, or a country. They literally have always had access to worldwide data. So complexity and simplicity, I think, is a part of this as well.
So that leads to my next question then. Before reading this article, what were your thoughts on Gen Z, Kristen?
I wasn't really clear on them. To me, they definitely skip to like their own drum machine. Not even drum beat. They have demands. It's like pros and cons to everything, but they have demands that to me are not justified. They're like, I'm not doing that for nothing. And it's kind of like, okay, on the one hand, I see where they're recognizing their worth and their value, but at the same time, you're not worth that. You're not there yet. To me, the ones that I've experienced, and this is my limited experience and exposure, and it of course does not apply to everyone. They don't care about anything before their time. The ones that I've come across do not care about anything before their time at all. Like a little bit older might have been like, oh, that's so and so. Oh, I hear about that. Oh, I know about that music artist. Or, okay, cool. That's what happened in the past. The ones that I come across now, if I mention something before their time, they're like, wait, was that before my time? Stop right there. They don't even want to hear that. So, my personal feelings are, is as it relates to wokeness and their blackness. I think their focus is other places when it comes to racism, because I feel like they have allowed cracks. They are allowing or permitting cracks in the foundation of what all of our ancestors and fighters and leaders in the past have like solidified for us to be able to do and move the way we do today. I don't feel like that respect and remembrance, and I said maybe it's our fault for not embedding it in them, but it feels like, I know they know about certain leaders from the past, but as far as being more relaxed about, I don't want to make race an issue. I don't want to put energy into that. And my son has even made comments like that. And it bothers me to no end, because a part of me understands not wanting to pour energy into something that's negative and making it more than what it needs to be, at the same time not acknowledging that it is a thing and we don't want it to happen anymore. Like we're going in reverse right now. We are going in reverse. Like Texas is one signature away from slavery. They're trying really hard. And Florida, if they're doing a whole lot of stuff that they're just trying to have black fade all the way to black. No more. Y'all are not even here. You don't matter what you think, what you feel. I mean, and they're blatant and they're brazen with it. And when I say cracks in the foundation, I mean the comfort levels of what racists now feel so good and so empowered. And we know it existed before he got here, but we know the orange one definitely emboldened the racist. And I'm speaking specifically about the racist, because everybody white is not out here to just, be a bad person. Although there are plenty who, by silence, are co-signing some of the things that go on. But the racists, they are comfortable like never before saying in social media, what? They feel super bad saying some of anything. And I have had some of the most antiquated racist things said to me that are mind-blowing today, because it's just like, you feel comfortable saying something like that, like, that's not happening today. Like, that's not what's going on today. We're not drinking from separate water fountains. I'm not entering in the building from the back. Like, what? Colors only? Like, who are you talking to? I made a comment one time, and this was years ago, and the guy responded to me like, well, if you didn't have a bunch of kids and weren't on welfare. And it's just like, really? And it's like, nobody's living in a bubble anymore. They know Black people we got some shit going on. They know more of who we are than we do. Like you said, James, so much has been just washed away from us, remembering and realizing our contributions to everything.
I definitely agree with Kristen on the entitlement, right? I feel like a lot of Gen Zers feel highly entitled to very specific things that they don't feel like they have to earn. There seems to be an opinion that just because they showed up, things should just be ready for them the way they want it. And I think some of that might be because they've also grown up during some pretty their generation is marked by some pretty big issues, right? George Floyd is one. The financial crisis of 2008, 2009. These Gen Zers would have been, they would have been old enough, as teenagers to have experienced that and seen what their parents went through, to have been displaced and possibly lost their house and had to move in with other people, right? They would have been old enough to see people losing their jobs and seeing businesses close. They're old enough to have gone through a pandemic, right, and had that experience, and then of course the whole George Floyd situation, right? So they lived through some pretty horrific things, and because they have access to the internet and they're so comfortable as digital natives, they're basically trying to cherry pick the best of the world and say, why can't we do that here? So why can't we have free healthcare, free education, but free elections, and work from home and be able to start our own businesses, but not have to pay for lunch and have, be able to bring our dogs to work, right? Like all these different things they're trying to cherry pick and create one thing, not understanding that things tend to work in systems. So, and it's not as simple as let's just take these 10 separate things and put together into one brand new system. It doesn't work that way. At least not today, it doesn't. So I think before reading this article, my opinion of Gen Z was just, access to information, highly comfortable, right? Creative, absolutely, but a bit entitled and doesn't necessarily, to the point that Kristen made, doesn't necessarily understand the history of things, not because they can't understand it, but they choose not to.
I just want to make sure we all know that the Gen Zs are those born from 1996 to 2015.
Like 18
That was
to,
important.
whether it's 18 to 24, 18 to 26 or something like that. I think that's or 18 to 28, something like that.
You mean how old they'd be today?
Yeah, that's the generation. I think it's 18 to 28. I looked it up before when I just didn't write it down on my notes here.
Yeah, yeah.
I agree with both of you. On the good side, I like their ingenuity. I like their cleverness. I like their um, when they have something on their mind that they're trying to get accomplished, they'll figure out a way to get it done because they have access to a lot of things that the previous generations didn't have. I also think they're pretty pampered. I do blame partially on our generation with the best intentions of trying to give them the best of things, trying to make their life comfortable and very soft. I guess the soft life is what they call it now. That's all that they've known. So they've taken that stance, and that's their foundation. And they're moving forward in ways the same way James has spoken of with regards to the entitlement and having things wanted their way and cherry picking. I do think that the internet has played such a part in programming them, and they've been programmed differently than we've been programmed. And I believe that's a big part of it is the intentional programming from the powers that be to make them behave in this particular way. I also believe, what I mean by that is like their access to going outside, their access to playing in the playgrounds. What the one thing that we in generation prior to us got was we got physical contact with one another. We were able to learn how to negotiate and play and speak amongst one another because if you were in somebody's face and you were in behaving, the group would either check you or the person would check you. Now you're online, and because of COVID, because of a whole host of things, they're not having interactions, and they talk crazy. A lot of this generation talk crazy to one another, and then when they get up on them, then it becomes a whole thing, and then you have this violence that comes from because they're a scared generation of any physical violence. Now they're pulling guns and things like that. So now and then they see these video games, which everything to them just looks like a video game. So I don't even think they process some of the violence that they consume. They consume it from their games, they consume it from their music, they consume it from their television, they consume it. So all those things were purposely programmed to these kids for them to behave the way they are. So I give them a bit of grace, even though a lot of these little niggas I don't like. Just the way they speak to you, I don't like. Like, but I can punch you out of your shoes. Like, what are we doing here? But
I can
anyway.
punch you out your shoes. That's funny.
I love your point on that, Ad, because digital anonymity is really something I think defines this generation in a big way. They can go online, set up a user ID that has nothing to do with who they are. It's nothing self-identifying. So in the daytime, they're one way, but then when they're online, they can be something completely different. They can choose to be a different identity, or they can choose to just be more authentic. Either way, what we see a lot of these folks being in person is different than what they are online. Every now and then they forget where they are. To your point, Abdul, they forget they're not anonymous in front of you, and a punch in the mouth is still a very effective deterrent to to talking crazy, right? And the world will do that. I'm not saying I advocate that. That's just the reality that sometimes a punch in the mouth is a punch in the mouth, right?
We refer to that as checks
So
and balances.
or street justice, as it's also called, street justice. So sometimes these guys are so used to saying, talking crazy online, they forget that they're at the grocery store and the person that's standing in front of them isn't digital.
Yeah.
That's not a digital fist coming at their very digital face, right?
Yeah.
It's so this digital anonymity is a factor here where I think more than any other generation, they don't recognize reality from illusion a lot of times.
Mm.
The one thing I do like about them, and it's the same thing I think harms them, is that they like to move away from the norm in terms of
Yes.
how and I like that about them.
Right.
But they don't do that in the context of having to understand that within a system like bees or anything else, there's an environment, and certain things have to be uniformed in order for things to work a particular way. Like there's the way they dress with regards to, like, I think certain, the way I was raised, yes, you can dress how you want, but certain things are for certain places, and it's not done to control you, but it's done to respect the environment that you're around. And a lot of them feel that it's always just about me. It's always me, 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 me. That if I'm uncomfortable, even if my behavior is disrespecting the things that are around me, it doesn't matter.
I do
think
appreciate
that's a fair point.
them just being like moving forward thinking. We're not doing that. That's the past. But there's certain pieces that I think it's like, okay, I understand you want to skip these steps, but you don't even know the steps you're skipping, and some of those are vital, and you're gonna come back. You're gonna, you will fail. There is some value in some of this old school stuff. Not all of it. Yes, change is always good. Change is necessary.
I agree, but I also agree. I believe that certain things are sacrosanct. They're just sacred to certain people, and if you tread on those beliefs of particular people, you're going to get pushed back. And because that generation loves to speak their mind all the time, which I don't mind, I believe that you should be able to speak your mind, but there's a certain way you should speak to people while you're speaking your mind. You can't just bogart me. This is how I like it, and if you don't like it, well, then you can. I'm like, well, you're disrespecting people, even though you're trying to speak your mind, and that's the balance that they haven't gotten yet. And I think a lot of that happens because they did not get punched in the face. A lot of checking. I was reading oh my God, what is his name? 12 rules to 12 rules to something in your life. But anyway, he was talking about I'll remember his name in a second, because he's a really big Canadian psychologist and influencer on YouTube. But he was talking about how rough play and interactions amongst boys and amongst people helps figure things out, because you understand that it's just not a verbal, something physically can happen to you. That's why rough play is important. He was talking about the importance of actually collective activities, because even if the parents won't check you, the kids can. And because these kids aren't interacting with one another, or they're only acting with kids that they have play date with that are chosen by the parents, that they don't have this. It's like when you go to the playground, it was whoever was there. You couldn't pick, and you just had to play within the lines. And you learned what the boundaries are, you learned what the lines are. And that generation didn't have that as much, or at least their parents chose who they got to play with. So diversity of behaviors and interactions, they weren't able to meet up front at an early stage, and so they behave a certain way now. Jordan Peterson, by the way, is the guy's name. I just remembered it. Dr. Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, I thought that's who you might be talking about. He talks a lot about dominant structures, and how dominant structures can help people recognize what truly is acceptable and what's not acceptable. Different, and just to be clear, different from bullying. We're not talking about bullying, right? That's an extreme thing. Although there's some value there also, right? There's some value there to understanding what a bully is and how to combat one. or how to deal with them, right? But in general, these dominant structures, you get it, up close and personal when you see people in person, right? And you start to learn, what does society think about a person in terms of who gets to be in charge, who gets to lead, who are the typical followers, what does that look like? And so you're right about Jordan Peterson. I thought that's who you might be talking about.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, it's definitely worth for our listeners to investigate him and some of the things he's got to say around dominant structures.
I have two more questions. Oh, yes, something, Kristen?
Do you think generally that the Gen Zs are just disrespectful?
Yes.
And again, everybody, this is not everybody that we're talking about. We're just giving our little opinion of.
Yeah, what's the phrase? Some but all. Some but not all. Some but all.
Some but all.
Some but all. Some but not all. Yes, I do believe.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Generally speaking, I do believe the way they carry themselves, they can be very disrespectful, even in something small as getting in adult conversations when they're not if I've seen two parents have a conversation and then the kid chime in, well, that's not what you said. I'm like, listen, you sit down over there.
Well, that's on the parent. That's on the parent. I think that's on the parent.
That is absolutely, all of this is on the parent. None of this is by their own doing. All of this has been taught behavior. So I'm just talking about, I'm talking about the end result of it though. Right. And the end result is yes.
I'll give you an example. I have a friend who had to fire an employee because in a situation where they had more of an open office environment where you show up and you just take an available seat. And my friend who is a manager was like, hey, I want to sit next to this employee, get to know them better and help them with their work. Every time she would sit next to this employee, that employee would stop what they were doing, log off, unplug, get up and move to someplace else. So the manager finally said, hey, why are you doing that? I'm sitting next to you because I want us to engage and be collaborative and all those other things. And this particular employee, who's clearly a Gen Zer, was like, well, I'm not doing that. I'm not sitting next to you. I have the right to sit where I want to sit and have my independence and not have someone micromanage me and sit over my shoulder. And it was like, whoa, wait, where'd all that come from? I just want to sit next to you so we can work together since you're on my team, and I want to make sure we do things a certain way and be available to answer questions and get to know you the way we get to know people, right? And this particular person just couldn't do it. It got so bad and the behavior became so extreme that unfortunately that individual had to be separated from the service of that company. But a Gen Zer who just...
I like that. Separated from the service of that company. You're fired!
She got fired. Yeah, she got fired. She created a hostile environment because she wanted to, rather than figuring out how to adapt to the environment that she joined, she wanted to shape the environment to her will. And I think that's one of those defining factors that we're talking about for some, not all, Gen Zers.
So I have two more questions, and we'll make these brief before we get on to the last part of the article. So this one is a part two. This next question is a two-parter. How does social media influence the ideas of Gen Z? And is Gen Z smarter because of technology? So how does social media influence them? And are they a smarter generation because of technology?
I don't know if they're necessarily, I don't know how social media, they've got more information. They've got more information at their disposal. I don't know if they're looking up the right stuff, but they've got access to it. That's one thing with social media, and they're connecting in a different way. And it's a different experience for them. I'm from a different generation. I'm from a different era. Although I'm still a part of the social media world, that's their world. I have a previous part of my life that I can always resort back to. This is all they know. But as far as technology, are they smarter because of technology? They are smart in a different way. I'm not going to say smarter. I'm going to say they're smart in a different way.
I completely agree with Kristen. I think they're more informed, but less wise.
Woo! Thank you. That was what I was trying to say.
But you didn't.
You know what, Pappy? You were adopted.
So just like Kristen said, right? Access to information for sure, right? They have a lot of access to information. However, social media then takes that information, packages it up into different viewpoints, different perspectives, and serves it up and says, okay, for those who like this bent on this information, here you go, right? Here's your set of facts, here's your set of information, so you can go prove this point for us, right? So social media does a really good job of creating personas and creating information to support those personas, and that's, I think, been to our detriment largely, right? That's prevented information from becoming intelligence, and because the information isn't becoming intelligence, and because this particular generation doesn't like to look backwards and take lessons from the past and
No,
apply them to our current, we avoid wisdom altogether. There is no wisdom. It's
that
what
small
serves
yet
me.
major step that is necessary.
Yeah.
I do think that social media specifically has made them very materialistic, very homogenized in terms of their wants and desires for material wealth. They're very commercialized in terms of their thinking that everything has to be for show, so none of it comes off as genuine. Technology, like you said, has made them smarter in the ability to regurgitate information. But like you also said, I don't think they have the sagaciousness to.
That was the word you're looking for?
No, it was
That's
another
the
word I was
word.
looking for.
Where's my thesaurus? I gotta look that one up.
It just means to be a sage, to be a wise person.
Got a bunch of
Thank you.
syllables with that one.
Oh, okay. Sagaciousness. I like that though. Okay. Sage. Sage. It's gonna be
Sage,
more
yeah.
sagey. Got you. Sage like.
I don't,
Got you.
to
Happy be
really,
reading.
I be reading. I be reading. White man be taking books from me. But so here's my last question: Is Gen Z narcissistic? Is Gen Z the narcissistic generation?
Yes, but not the only one. I think that the baby boomers, similar, right? Not all, some were also narcissistic, and again, it's from the same thing, right? Coming from trauma, right? Coming from the trauma of Vietnam and that era, coming off of war for baby boomer. I'm sorry, for Gen Z, coming out of the financial crisis, coming out of a pandemic, right? It's you end up in a situation where it's survival in a different way, not survival of a class of people, not survival of a family, but me, right? How do I survive? And that has created a narcissism that says, okay, I'm going to look out for me. Number one, that's it. And what's interesting about that is, as much as that's the case, in my opinion, for some, not all, that same population, Gen Z, is very socially active for the causes that are important to them, right? So as much as they can be narcissistic about what they want in that moment, it does include a social activism, which you would think would run counter to that narcissism, but it doesn't. It supports it in a different way. So I do think there is there's narcissism in every generation, and again, not all of any generation for sure, has that, but two come to mind for me, not just Gen Z, but the baby boomers. They just are born out of trauma.
I think they're a little narcissist. Yeah, I think so. And that is one of my one-word answers.
Yes.
But I want to go back. I want to go back briefly though on the technology part. And technology is advancing, but I don't think that technology is advancing any more than humans are ready for it to advance. In other words, it's moving because humans are moving forward. So I do think that that's just kind of goes together. But the Gen Zs are how they're moving forward is what bothers me. I know that's a little bit to the left of what you just asked, but I just was thinking about the technology, because it's like, which comes first, technology or the Gen Zs? Like their attitudes and how they are, how they move, but it kind of almost goes together. So I guess we're in like a transitional phase of sliding into that next level of technology, flying cars and shit. I don't want to be here.
I do think that this generation is the narcissistic generation, but I think it's undergirded by the state. I think the state wants these children to be narcissists because then they can start ratting on one another and start dividing them into groups. I remember reading a book in like high school, it might have been junior high, A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. And he talked about the generation of kids who would tell on their parents and who are being propagandized by the state for them to believe certain things. And if you look at where we're at now, where we have fake news, the idea of the fact that there is something called fake news, or the idea of the fact that you can look up your own information, and certain classes of people get certain information specific to that class of people. I think it's all by design, and those things make a group of people narcissistic to believe that it's always about you, because every nature about yourself is being fed by the instantaneousness of social media, the instantaneousness of Uber Eats. Like everything is just instant, and that reads a social and the separation of kids, like we spoke about earlier, but them not having to play one another, and developing an ecosystem in order to learn how to play amongst one another. I think that all those things contribute to these kids being as narcissistic as they are. And it doesn't seem to be getting any better, because by design, our government, our corporations, and our social structure is purposely putting people in boxes so them to have no other groups of people to turn them away from having these particular behaviors. Everything is just feeding them down this particular way of being. From sports to just like everything, it's just feeding their egos. So everything feeds their ego. It's never about even the way we speak about mental health. It's me and my piece. It's me and my. It's always me and my, me. Everything mental health. It's about how am I doing? What me and my space, and I think when you're really walking in the world and dealing with people, they say the best service is service to others. And even though they're, like you said, are part of these Black Lives Matter movements and things like that, it still revolves back to what they want for themselves. It's never an altruistic thing about I'm doing this for them, even though I don't benefit. I'm going to be an ally, even though I don't benefit. It always serves their needs.
Right.
So.
Well, now Black folks have been deprived for a long time, so you kind of can't help others until you help yourself. But I think
I wasn't talking about Black people. There was a lot of people in the forefront and doing a lot of this Black Lives Matter stuff were white people. Painting on the walls and all that stuff. I just said the whole. I was speaking about them collectively, but even with Black kids, it's if it doesn't serve their needs, and this might sound, I might cut this out. But even with regards to the approach to the transgender issue, it was based off of what they want without regards to the people around them and how they felt about it. Like having a collective conversation about doing something that's never been done before. What you're saying?
I think it would be awesome if you started a collective Black healing movement. Yay, go for it. Because that's something that it's not, we talk about mental health, but we don't think of it as a collective Black people as a whole, healing as a whole, as us. You know, when you see your Black
I think you do, but it's presented differently. The collective Black, when Horatius would get together and they would have ceremonies, that was collective Black healing. Horatius.
Oh, Horatius.
I'm sorry, I pronounced it Horatius. When they would get together, that was a collective Black healing. When people go to a mosque, that's collective Black healing. When people
understood. You're wait a minute. James is
pulled out a book
on the screen now, everybody.
I pulled out a book.
Put a book for everyone. Post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Yeah, this is incredible. Yeah, Dr. Joy DeGruy. Joy DeGruy. I want to mention this. So, post-traumatic slave syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. You can look her up on YouTube as well. She's got a great video that talks about this. This book was fascinating in terms of what she took it all the way back to slavery and talked about how things that happened from slavery to all the different stages we went through to get to today affect Black people today,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That generational trauma, and really puts like science and sociology behind it to really show why we are where we are,
Yes.
and then talked about how do we heal. So, in case anyone, you guys didn't see
Now,
me do this, but I was
it's
turning around looking at my library, just looking for this book. It was incredible and absolutely healing for me in particular to understand some of how I was raised, some of what I saw growing up in school, some of what happens in the schoolyards, and when I went to college and had much more diverse group of people around me, and where I fit into that, and even through today. So, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. Incredible book. Talks about the very thing that we are just talking about.
now, but the healing. So is
Mm-hmm.
her reference to us healing, is it a collective Black people, we all heal collectively? Because yes, the need to heal individually is necessary, but I don't see, and I understand what you're saying, Abdul, how the Orishas and different practices and cultural beliefs and faiths, but on a general level, like how Charlemagne pushed mental health wellness. I think you should start it. A general Black collective healing movement. I nominate
Sure.
you.
Sure.
You know what? I take
Sorry.
it back. I nominate James, not you. I nominate James.
Yeah. James, I think
We're in
James is
better
way
hands
better.
with James.
Yeah, we're way better hands with James than me. So.
Here's the challenge, right? Everyone has a different opinion on what their healing needs to be. So not everyone's willing to even think about the fact that they are still impacted today by something that happened generations ago. So just on that point, people won't
That's
agree.
the self-healing first, which is necessary.
Yeah, there's a self-healing, there's a self-acknowledgement that they need to heal
Mm-hmm.
that has to precede finding out how to heal individually and then how to heal culturally.
Okay.
Let's read the next article. Then I have like maybe two or three questions for the next space. So let's read the end part.
Recent political science research has found that Gen Z is more likely to prefer women and Black candidates for political office to white male candidates, which seems to confirm the view that wokeness and its accompanying dislike for white males have infected Gen Z. Our findings, however, do not support this research. We found similar differences between Gen Z men and women on the topic of women as political leaders. Over 40% of Gen Z men prefer a male political leader, the highest among men of any generation, while 30% of Gen Z women prefer a female political leader, second only to boomer generation women. Why do Gen Z men prefer a male political leader? The polling data shows 66% of Gen Z men believe women aren't tough enough for politics. On the other side, 75% of Gen Z women said women's toughness is not one of the factors keeping women out of politics. Instead, 90% of Gen Z women believe there are not more women in political office because men hold women back. Although gender differences exist on some policy issues within Gen Z that make it challenging to characterize the generation as uniformly woke, it is Gen Z's views on democracy and the potential use of political violence that are stunning. When asked whether it was more important to have a strong leader or protect democracy, over half of Gen Z respondents stated it was more important to have a strong leader. No other generational group was close to 50% in preferring a strong leader over democracy. Also, when asked if force should be used if the American way of life was disappearing, 2/3 of Gen Z respondents agreed, while no other generational group had a majority of respondents in favor of using force to protect the American way of life. The results from our work suggest there is a strong conservative element within Gen Z on policy issues and the role of women in politics, a shift to more traditional views among the male population. Liberalism is also strong within Gen Z, both in males and females, which should be concerning to all Americans, coupled with the fact President Biden's approval among Gen Z has dropped precipitously from the highs enjoyed by former President Obama. It is apparent both sides have miscategorized this generation greatly.
Do you believe gender roles are necessary in society anymore?
Gender roles?
Mm-hmm.
You mean as in representation, like women in politics? Do I
No,
think that women need to
as
be?
in things that men should do, things that women should do. Gender roles.
As gender roles, as in
You were thinking cinnamon rolls, weren't you? Cinnamon
no,
rolls?
I
I
was
love cinnamon rolls.
butter rolls, cinnamon rolls. No, 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 no. I don't think that. No, no.
So you don't think that gender roles are necessary anymore? Or are there things that men and
I
women?
don't think that they're necessary, but I think that there's still specific roles that some are better at than others. I mean, men are stronger physically in certain things that I, as a lady, as a delicate fleur, would rather not do. um, I don't know that. All right, like a football team, a male football team, I think that a male football team is fine. If women want to play football, then a female football team, but I don't think men and women need to be on the same team playing football.
So that would
I'm
be a
not,
yes then, because that's a gender role, isn't it? Would those be considered gender roles? If we're not
well,
doing it
well,
collectively, then and if it's parsed into two different portions, then would that be considered a gender role?
I don't know, Slappy. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it, it, it's like if you say is it gender roles, that to me would mean football is for men. No, women can have a football team, but women with men playing football together, I'm not into that.
Okay.
So
James, same question.
was that clear, or did you just give up on me? I'm not sure. I felt like you just
I understand. I understood you.
I felt like you're like,
No,
this bit
no.
confusing.
I understood your point on it. But when we get to my section, I don't agree with it. But I understood your point on it, yes.
Okay.
Depends on what we're talking about, right? So we it just so happens, genetically speaking, women give birth, men do not. That will never change, right? That is the reality. That's how nature has made us, right? So
Agree.
I think so to your point, Kristen, that because of the nature of males versus females, there's certain things that women are always going to do, and there's certain things that men just won't be able to do. That's just the reality, especially
And
again,
vice
childbirth
versa.
and vice versa, right? And then to your point, because of those genetic differences, having, no one should be saying that women shouldn't play football, right? It's okay, there's a male league and a female league so that we can keep competition on a level playing field, right? Can you imagine, Shaquille O'Neal playing basketball against Lisa Leslie, right? I mean, two very extremely talented, famous basketball players, but clearly there's a difference in physicality that's there, right? Now let's take it out of physicality. Let's take it to a different arena, the mental arena. Take it to an intellectual arena. Jobs. Being able to lead in corporations, CEO positions, those things. Those aren't based on physicality. Those are based on your ability to have the experience to learn, education, and then the ability to lead. Those aren't based on genetics. Those are based on more intellect. So in those arenas, you can have a level playing field, right? There you can actually do that. So there's a bit of a difference there.
Agree.
The yes, in aggregate, on average, men and women are equally as smart. It's the ends that they change. The smartest people you'll find will be men based on the science that's been done. And the dumbest people you'll find will also be men. So the variations come on the edges. So the fact that you'll get an Einstein, the fact that you'll get an Eric Whitten, the fact that you'll get, even though you have a Lisa Randall, who's a physicist who's doing great, it's the extremities that are where the disproportion happens. But in aggregate, in the middle, on average, men and women are equally as smart as one another. Yeah.
And I would, a little differently, I would say, like, take a topic like empathy, which is a 21st century executive trait that has to be present, right? Women are just better at empathy than men, And again, it comes down to the DNA, right?
Mm-hmm.
Women give birth. And
Mm-hmm.
so women are going to have a stronger connection in most cases, not all, but in most cases, to a child than a male would, because they lived together in the same unit, right?
Mm-hmm.
For a much longer period of time. They shared heartbeats. They shared all those things. So it's a interesting question that you're asking about gender. Um, as I think about it relating to Gen Z, I think the one of the
We're gonna
positive
get
things, at
there.
least to
We're gonna
my,
get there. Well, we're
we're
gonna
gonna
get
get
there.
there.
We're gonna
Okay,
get there.
all right,
I'm
okay,
leading into that direction. I'm leading
okay,
into that direction.
got you.
Well,
So
Slappy, what do you think?
I think that gender roles, certain gender roles, not all gender roles, are necessary. I don't think gender roles are a bad thing. I think the fact that, like James said, anatomically we're built different, so more laborious jobs. I understand why it leans towards men and why they should do that one. I don't expect men and women to be physically hurting one another. When it comes to things like defense, to protection, I do believe protection, even though I'm not saying a woman can't defend herself. I believe a man should be the one defending. If a burglar comes in the house, that is the man's job. If a guy approaches you and your woman, let you step in front of your woman and you protect her. Your job is to protect.
But with
So
that, we do have three sisters that can kick many a man's ass with no
yes, they
problem.
can. Yes, but I tell you this much: both of our sisters can fight well,
Mhm.
but I don't think they'd stand a chance better than I would against somebody the size of Suge Knight. You know what I'm trying to say? Like,
No, no, I hear you. I hear you. I'll tell you this too, because I like there's something in how you said when you said more likely, right? I was recently as part of something that I'm working on, I had to tour a construction site, and of course it was 95% male, right?
mm-hmm,
But the 5% female, they were working, and
mm-hmm,
those females came in all shapes and sizes. I saw a 4'11", with her hard hat on, and she had her tool belt on. She was drilling and hammering like everybody else. She was getting it in. So there's now, was she one of the people carrying the beams? Right? No,
mm-hmm.
she wasn't doing that. But she was working. But then again, there are some older guys that were on that site too that could not carry those beams. So that's a mixed environment where there's skill sets that anyone can do, and then there's skill sets that you do need a certain anatomical structure, meaning you got to be super strong to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Could a woman do it? Absolutely. A super strong woman could absolutely do it. But I did see that mixed gender site, and I was really glad to see it. And I'm hoping
Even
that we
even
can.
even even to the point of where certain job requirements, if you're working at UPS or FedEx,
Mhm.
what requires a man to lift a certain amount of weight is different. Even the same with the military, the requirements are different. The amount of pull-ups, the type of running, so those things. I think those things are used to be par for the course, but now they're changing. So this leads to my next question, which I think you spoke on already, but I'd like to get in detail. The Gen Z generation thinks that men and women should collaborate in sports. So when you had something like Leah Thomas, the swimmer, who was 277th against the men, and then went to swim with the women and was the national champ, the generational Z would think that's fair. So, what are your thoughts on incorporating men, women, transgender sports to just be sports? Should it just be sports across the board, no labels at all? Whoever can fit the bill, have at it.
No,
Yeah, go, Kristen.
no, I don't think so at all. I think there needs to be a new category for this new category, a new space for them. I'm not, if I ran track, I'm not running against a man. And I don't, wherever you identify with, fine, but you are what you are and you're a man and I'm not running against you. I'll respect you, but I'm not running against you. And I don't remember which one. There've been a couple of different cases where these guys are on the swim team and then they're smoking these girls.
Yeah, that was
You
Leah
know,
Thomas. The track thing was the two young boys. There were a couple incidents.
there's been quite a few
The
cases where
power lifter who broke all the records. Yeah.
no, I think that there needs to be a new space, a new lane to allow for those in that particular lane to compete against those in that particular lane.
James?
This applies to both Gen Z and wokeness. There's a difference between equality and equanimity.
Oh, we got
Yeah.
smarter just now. What?
Equality is access, right? Equality says everyone should have access to the same opportunities, right? And I think we culturally in America at least get stuck there, right? But we forget about equanimity. Equanimity talks about representation, right? So it's one thing to say everyone can play football, right? That should happen, sure. But to as we were talking about and using this as a great example, should we have male football players playing with female football players? That's not a good idea. That's not equanimity, right? It's equality. Everyone's got access to the same thing, but then we lose the equanimity. Now we're creating a situation purposely where someone's going to have a major advantage over someone else for no other reason than their anatomical structure. So equanimity says, okay, everyone has access to football, but let's make sure like is like, right? Let's have two different groups, right? One for men, one for women. So now you're competing on the same ground. So on the physicality side, that's there, right? In terms of wokeness, and we talk about business, right? Equality says everyone's got the opportunity to become the CEO. But what do we see in reality? We don't see a lot of diversity at the CEO level, both in terms of gender or in terms of culture. So equanimity says, well, shouldn't there be a more of a representation of what the United States has culturally in the CEO class? So if 12% of the population is Black, shouldn't it be that about 12% of the CEOs would be Black as well? We don't see that today, right? There's an equanimity that's missing. So we say we have equality, you can apply, right? But we know that in practice we lack the equanimity, right? So those are two different things, and they apply both to the Gen Z story as well as to wokeness. And then one other thing I'll say about that, and specifically in terms of wokeness, that has been capitalized on, where people are like, oh, I'm not getting the opportunities to move up because the job has to go to a woman or a Black person. Right. And it's like, well, no, what we're seeing is a traditional issue where Black people and women aren't getting into these roles. Right.
Right.
And we have a situation where there's a lack of representation that we want to correct. Oh, then how come that means I have to miss my opportunity? Well, you didn't, right? And you never will, right? You got the system is rigged in your favor, right? What we're trying to do is help create more equanimity in that system. So while you can say all you want, but it's equal. But look at the results. It's not equal, right? So I think that's where this whole wokeness story really takes it off the rails politically. It's like, you got this guy, I'm not going to say any names because I don't want to give them any daylight on air, but you got these political all-stars that are out there saying, I'm anti-woke, I'm anti-wokeness, right? And you have a whole bunch of people following that because in their minds, he's defending them, right? That's my opportunity. That should have been my job. That was my promotion that went to someone else, right? And it's like, no, that other person was just as qualified, but they were being overlooked because we're in a system that has determined preferences. So we're trying to create more equanimity, right? You can say, oh, you want the equalities there, but if you're looking at the results, you're not seeing equal results. That's a problem.
Yep.
I don't think to answer the question, I don't think men and women should play sports collectively. I do think people should have their own lanes and deal with the competitors in their specific gender lanes because of biological difference. But then again, I think what I think is happening now is that a lot of Gen Z are purposely trying to overlook differences because they don't want to be grouped into this idea of being pick the ism, racism, colorism, whatever the ism is at the moment. They don't want to be grouped into that category. So they're purposely overlooking the differences, even though the reality of the situation or the reality of the environment that you're in will tell you that differences matter. Differences would make us. I hear a lot of white people say, well, I don't see color. And I always push back, well, you should see color. The color is important for you to see
Yes. Color
because it
right.
gives you, it's very important. And you can see the difference between things that are going on. So I think the Gen Z generation are purposely trying not to see differences because of this whole wokeness, and it's pushing and it's going to harm them in the long run.
Right. Like they don't want to pour energy into this. They don't want to make it an issue, so to speak. And in doing that, you're creating a bigger issue.
Yeah, and I
But
think that's again people trying to oversimplify. You can see the differences between people and still respect the people, right?
Yeah.
You don't.
Right.
It's not like, okay, because I see this difference now, you're somehow less. No, we want the diversity. That diversity that's there in size, race, religion, gender, every other gender expression, every other way you can think about, differences. Those all help to solve complex problems because everyone will look at complex problems slightly differently, and complex problems require oftentimes complex solutions. So diversity in nature provides diversity in thought. And we continue to overlook that point that diversity is not just a social advantage, it's also a business advantage, right? It behooves us to bring in as much diversity as possible so that we can win together, but we'll go forward faster. Because if you got five guys looking at the same problem, all with the same education, same background, there's blind spots that are there. They just cannot see because they
but
don't have
here's the other
diversity of
thing
thought to
about
see it.
here's the other thing about Gen Z, and to which article stuck out me specifically is it's sort of a faux wokeness. It's not even a real wokeness because they're woke unless it's their space that has to compromise. So they don't
Mhm.
mind pushing everybody else's space and saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. But then they have their personal space, this personal agenda starting to be compromised, then they become militant about it. Or we need these safe spaces. And then they behave like the people that they say they don't like behaving. That's why these violent clashes between the two groups are beginning more groups of people are beginning more violent over the years in terms of the protests and things of that nature, is because they're fine with you changing thing and this idea of wokeness, and this should be idealistically this until it becomes their personal space and things that they personally uh they've invested some sort of interest into or invested some sort of energy into, and then their whole attitude changes about everything. It's the same lady at the dog park. I know she's not a Gen Z, but which I'm just using her as an example of, hey, I voted for Hillary Clinton, but black guy, you need the guy Mike the gentleman that Cooper, what is his name?
That
Christian
wasn't,
Central,
Cooper.
that wasn't
I
a
know
dog park. He was
it
just
was
It
walking.
was
He was just
Central
watching birds.
Park. Central Park
the
bird watcher.
yeah,
Yeah.
Central Park Birdwatcher. But the point I'm making is the idea of the fact that they will tell you, enumerate every liberal thing that they've ever done, but when it doesn't convenience or they're inconvenienced by a thing, they go back and then they become this sort of uber conservative behavior because it's their thing. And I think Gen Z behaves in the exact same way. That they're liberal about things that have nothing to do with them, things they don't care about. Yeah, change this, change that. But then enter their space, then they become extremely conservative and militant about the thing that they care about specifically. So I think sort of a faux wokeness.
So liberal socially, conservative personally.
Conservative, yeah, yeah, yeah. And but here's the other part, and then I'll get to the last two questions. Liberals have always been that sort of way, that they've been liberal socially. What did it say? What did Malcolm X say? That the most segregated uh, part of the day in America is the church on Sunday. That
Mhm.
all the liberals can they talk and preach equality and all this other stuff, and then they go to their white church with only white people, and they leave it that way, and black people have to go over here. So my criticism of liberals for a very long time, that's always been their behavior. They put on the Tina of liberalism, but the core of them is, well, I want you. I'm saying the nice way of saying, do this for me because I need this done for me. So, and if I give you a couple extra pieces of cracker that the guys down south won't give you, that's fine. But the true nature is, I want what I want, and I need you to do a thing for me. I really don't care what happens to you after the fact. And they proved it over and over again with the requests of Black people. And then when it comes down to voting season, how much they try to rally the troops and try to, they give you the crumbs. But when you say, hey, let's have a no lynching law, if they can't find a way to, or hey, let's have a reparation bill, they can't figure out how to get it done. Or hey, there's always is a long list of what they could have done. Even the Civil Rights Act of '65. The only reason that got done because the guy tried to shoot it down by putting women in the bill, and it got passed anyway. And the guy who did it was a Democrat from Virginia named Howard. So, I mean, historically, it's been an ongoing thing with the liberals in terms of how they treat Black people. And Gen Z, I see, behave the exact same way. So maybe it's the kids mimicking the grandparents or the great-grandparents, but it hasn't changed. The behavior is always the same. If it's me and mine or what concerns me, I'm going to treat it like no one else exists. But if it doesn't matter, have at it. You know what I mean? So anyway, last question before we get to the lesson. Kristen, do you think Gen Z is moving in the right direction? And what advice would you give them?
I don't know what direction they're moving in. And this is their turn. They're up to bat. I think that the advice I would give them is just recognize value in some things that you may not be connected to or interested in. Just don't dismiss. What is it? What is that phrase? Don't throw the baby away with the bathwater.
Bathwater, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of like there's some value in things there is value in things before your time, whether you believe it or not. That's just my issue. I've come across these young people that are just like, stop, I don't even want to hear, I don't want to know. But just slow down, take your time, and maybe ease up on the meanness. Me as in me, myself, and I.
Yeah. James? Do you think they're moving in the right direction? And what advice would you give them?
I like Kristen's answer. I don't know that they have a direction. I think they have a philosophy, right? I think Gen Zers are just more disruptive by nature. And I actually like that disruptiveness. They're disrupting the traditional thought patterns that we all have. So that there's some value there, right? To challenge everything that we think we know and that we think is right, and to make us re-question, is it? And is there something we can do better? That part's good, right? Where they lose me is when there's an assumption that their assumptions are correct, right?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes they put so much stock in their assumptions that they have it right, that they overlook a whole bunch of other things. So there's some tremendous blind spots. They're coming from a good place in terms of their heart, and they're trying to fix an issue that they see. But there's a what's the word? There is a I don't know. There's a lack of understanding the foundational elements that go into where we are today that they overlook, and they basically oversimplify, the where we are today. And they think because of where I am and because of what I understand with my assumptions, why can't we just do this? Why isn't it that easy?
I think straight up dismiss.
Yeah.
They see it. They're like, get that out of here. What is that? Information, that valuable stuff? Get that out of here. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Continue.
So it comes across with a childlike innocence because there's no foundation there, right? It's just, well, I want this because I want this. So what I would say is, I don't think like I said, I don't think they have a direction. I think there's a philosophy that's there. I like the disruptive nature of what they do. What I don't like, and I wish they would do more of, is fortify their assumptions. While they're in the process of questioning everybody else, question themselves and what they think is right, and make sure that are the solutions you're coming up with really based in something that's doable, that's really possible.
Mm-hmm.
I third that art statement, I don't think they have. I think they're running around with a chicken with their head cut off, just trying to. I think they're being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. I think
Mhm.
whatever you say, if you say left, they're going to say right just for the sake of it. And there's no point to it. And with that, sometimes they hit it out of the park because it should be questions, but other times it's just chaos. And if I had any advice for them, I think discernment may be the whole what all three of us are trying to say, like judge better
Mm.
and and learn from the past. Because the mistakes of the past have always shown that when you try to skip steps or you try to, usurp a process, it always ends up to your demise. So learn from the past and learn the mistakes that other people make and learn and don't be afraid to look for mentors and people to show you the way. Like you don't have all the answers to everything. Like there are people out there who's willing to help if you're willing to learn. And like I watched a lot of kung fu movies growing up. And sometimes the master had to pop the kid in the head, like, hey, listen, you're talking too much and doing too less. I'm showing you something. You just need to follow me and stop asking so many questions. We'll get to the questions when you get past a level for you to be able to understand that you aren't even asking the right questions. Because some of the questions that they ask, I don't think are the right questions. And I think they're just asking them to show how smart they are sometimes, not to solve a problem. So, with that being said, the lesson, Kristen, what did you learn from this article today?
That I was born at the time I was supposed to be born.
With Jesus?
And I appreciate, yes, I appreciate, like, I appreciate
The apostles? You appreciate the apostles?
I do. All 12 of them. Wait, was it 12? That's disciples.
It was 12 disciples, yeah.
Yeah, disciples.
So that was it. You appreciate the time you were born.
I do, because I guess you take things for granted, and I'm just like, oh, this is just whatever. And I had my moment of like, I don't really want to hear that. But looking back, I valued things that came before me, and I appreciated the music, the history. And I mean, maybe not in real time, but slowly but surely, and maybe hopefully some of the Gen Zers will over time, I hope, appreciate something. But no, I think the lesson is, you know what? Your time was not your era. The things that came out from your era were dope. And just using music as an example, every generation, the previous generation is like, music and what it was when I was coming up. You know what I mean? This music today is not what it was. Even rap, everybody's like, oh, older heads are like, rap's not what it used to be. So that's every generation. My grandmother had something to say about James Brown when my mother was listening to it. My mother has something to say about Prince when I'm listening to it. So it's just like every generation thinks that theirs was the better one. The kids, they ain't listening to nobody though. But yeah, I guess is that even a lesson, or is that just an observation? Not necessarily a lesson, more of an observation. I appreciate my
James?
I'll start by saying I think the conversation for me was more helpful than the article. I really enjoyed this conversation. A lot of good stuff came out of this. So with that, I always like threes. I'll go with three lessons. Number one, and this speaking specifically to Gen Zers. There's a book called Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. I believe it's the fifth habit. It says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. I think that's something that Gen Zers and all of us should really take to heart before spouting off all of your assumptions and all the things that you think are wrong with the world and all the solutions you have. Seek first to understand, then and only then seek to then be understood. So understand what you're doing, what you're talking about before you start talking about it. That's one. Number two, I want to talk about resilience. I think, again, this is a generation that really saw economic trauma, they saw social trauma, they saw physical trauma, right? The economic trauma was the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. Then they saw the social trauma of COVID, right? The fact that we had lockdowns, that people had to stay shut in for a significant amount of time, right? People lost their jobs, all those things. And then you saw George Floyd happen, right? And while we as Black people have seen how many George Floyds over our lifetime, for whatever reason, it was George Floyd who woke everyone else up to really see what was going on in Black communities, right? So that's when wokeness went wide, right? It went from something that we nodded to each other about to now everyone saw it and was like, wow, we all need to signal to each other to be safe, right? That this can happen or that this is happening to Black people. So Gen Zers just need to understand that they grew up watching trauma. They are impacted by it. They need to find a way to heal themselves, not just talk about mental health, but actually do the work, right? It's more to doing the work than seeing a therapist and saying, well, I go to a therapist, but if those sessions aren't productive, then you're not doing anything, right? So you got to heal and then be resilient. How do I take everything that's happened to me and find a way to move forward? Right. And I think Gen Zers kind of get trapped within that trauma and then decide, I'm not going to call it trauma. Right. The third thing I would say is get outside and away from your computer. There was a time where people met at parties and clubs and met at the supermarket and, um, you know, interacted in person. And that has value. There's something you'll learn about dealing with people when you deal with them in person that you cannot get from over a TV screen or over a computer screen. So I think Gen Zers need to do a better job of, it's fine to date online. I'm not knocking it, but every once in a while, walk across the club and ask the person at the bar for a dance, right? Every once in a while, talk to the person standing in front of you at the supermarket and figure and learn how to create a conversation out of nothing, right? There's value there. And without doing that, you'll never truly understand what it is to interact authentically with other human beings.
The thing I learned, the thing I learned from this episode is that Gen Z have all the upgraded processes to deal with a very fast-paced world, but in the process of getting that, they lost the selflessness that you need to connect with other people and to do things for other people, even if you didn't benefit from the thing that you're doing. And I don't know how you implement that into their psyche, and not everything that you're not going to benefit from everything that you do, even though globally you will. So just because you don't get the job that you want because there are quotas that happen because a group of disenfranchised people didn't get, you didn't benefit immediately. But the fact that that person got that makes a world more harmonious, which means you get opportunities and benefits from things. So it doesn't have to be a one-for-one exchange all the time. Sometimes, maybe I guess what I'm trying to say is that I hope that they learn that there is a lot of indirect results that you get from being selfless. And if they can't see it, touch it, feel it, or it feels good to them, to me, that's where the narcissism comes from, that they don't want to deal with it. And like to your point, Kristen, maybe that's the reason why they don't look to the past or they don't care anything about the past, because they don't feel it directly affects them immediately. And I think if they have every other process that you can possibly, think quick, they're clever, they can do all the things that even athletically, they're just stronger, they're faster, they're all the things that you'd want from a generation of kids who you want to be better than the previous generation. But they lack that one component, and it's a major component. And it might be also a spiritual component. Like maybe the thing I'm talking about is also a spiritual thing that goes along with it, that the need to serve others and not benefit directly from it. So that's what I learned from this. And I don't know how you implement that in somebody, but if that's what I would like, that's what I got out of it. So with that being said, this has been the Ignorance Is Contagious Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe on all social media platforms. And until next time, Kristen.
Thank you, everybody.
Rock is in the building. Facto.